Yeah, I think we can start, guys. I'm just trying to get in touch, but you guys can start. Okay. Aditya will join soon.
Okay. So yesterday we were on this slide. So as we were discussing the governance, so governance means it is your abiding by the rules. So now in this, as you can see, one live example of the governance process is equal to security I can give. So people who are there in this batch who have basically came to this batch to attend CISSP. One live example is you people are currently my stakeholders. Your ultimate goal and objective is to clear the exam for which you basically enrolled in the training. So in order to clear the exam, I have created a training program where I have mentioned that it will be a weekend batch. It will start morning at 11 o'clock and it will finish by 6 o'clock. These are the topics which will be covered. I have created the slides. I have created the notes. I have highlighted the CBK. All that thing I have done. Now, based on that, I have implemented the training program. I have created all that, and I have implemented the training by covering all the topics which are covered in the exam, by discussing questions, by clearing your doubts. Where I am seeing the drastic results, people are able to clear more and more examination, which is basically leading a positive impact on the business. And I am getting more and more CISSP batches. So this is a one live example of a governance. One another live example of a governance is this one. As you can see, here we have a security governance where we are doing the strategic plan. The strategic planning is depending on the risk tolerance of the organization, where we have defined the organizational structure, the roles and responsibilities of individual, what would be the enterprise structure. And in order to support the security governance, we have implemented the policies, standard, procedures, and guidance. Based on that, we have created a program, security program. Okay, we have created a framework where we have selected the controls and allocated the resources who will be implementing the controls. And based on that, the people whom the controls which I have selected and the resources which I have allocated, they will implement and deploy the security controls. They will detect the attack. They will verify via KPI and KRI that whether the security controls which they have implemented is effective. They will maintain the control with the help of proper change management and all. In case if there is an attack and all happens, they will follow the process of incident response for attack recovery. They will audit the control to stay in compliance. They will update where and when it is necessary. They will patch and they will collect the feedback that whether their security program is effective or not. So the alignment of security function to strategy, goal, mission, and objectives. Information security management validates appropriate policies, procedures, standard, and guidelines which can be implemented to ensure business operations are conducted with an acceptable level of risk. Strong governance is the best indicator of senior leadership commitment to effective, consistent risk management across the organization to achieve ongoing mission and business success. Security basically exists to support and enable the vision, mission, and business objective of the organization. Yesterday, we already discussed how the organization structures is. So basically, we have a vision. In order to support a vision, we have a mission. Based on the vision and mission, we create strategic plan, which is validated between 3 to 5 years. Then we have, in order to support the strategic plan, is further divided into tactical plans. The validity of the tactical plans is between 1 to 3 years, and then we create an operational plan. Their validity is between 0 to 6 months. So live example, your audit, your vulnerability assessment and pen testing. These are all live example of your operational plan. Whereas your data classification plan, business continuity, disaster recovery plan, change management plan, patch management plan, incident management plan. These are all my tactical documents. Risk assessment is also a tactical document. Risk management is a strategic document. So this is normally the organizational governance structure where we have a board of directors. Then we have a CEO, we have a CIO, CTO, we have a CISO, security department, management and staff. Now from the exam point of view, you need to remember that the CISO should report as much high as possible. Now why it is recommended that the CISO should report as much high as possible? So normally in the organization, you must have seen that a CISO directly reports to the senior management or board of directors. They don't report to a CIO, CTO. The reason why we don't recommend a CISO reporting to a CIO and CTO, because it is not necessary that every time the CIO and CTO should be from the cybersecurity background. Okay, if a CISO is reporting to a CIO, CTO, CFO and all, then a CISO will communicate something else. The CIO, CTO and CFO will understand something else and they will communicate something else to the board of directors, because there is a communication and skill set gap. So the CIO, CTO and CFO, they are not that much, they don't have that much background about cybersecurity and all. That is the reason, in order to avoid the, confusion, in order to avoid the communication gap, we basically recommend that a CISO should always report as much as high as possible. And then we basically have a security department and the management. So here security department is the one who is basically going to implement the controls. One live example of this I can give you. Your SOC team, your security operations team is a live example of a security department. Just a second, team. So the security department live example, your SOC team, who basically implements the controls or who basically manage and maintain the controls. There are live example of security department only. Then we have a management. Here we are talking about the HR, admin department and all. And then finally we have the employees. So now when we are talking about the organizational governance structure, one of the important element is the budget is the driving factor in any organization. Now why I say budget is the driving factor on any organization? Security, always remember from the exam point of view that the security is much less expensive and easier to justify when it is built into the design versus added as an afterthought. So now my question is for everyone. Okay, now let's say let's elaborate this. Security is much less expensive and easier to justify when built into the design versus added as an afterthought. Let's say team, currently I have a web server. Okay, I basically have a web server. Now this web server is basically hosted under IIS, Internet Information Services. Okay. Now basically I am running a website. I am basically running a website, http://www.contoso.com. This is the website. Okay, this is the website. Now my question is for everyone, this website which I am running in this web server, it is basically running on an HTTP protocol. It is not even running on an HTTPS protocol. So now when I am talking about that a security is less expensive and easier to justify when it is built into the design. So in the design stage, we basically do something called as a threat modeling. Okay, we basically do something called as a threat modeling. Okay, so always remember, threat modeling is something which we do it in the design stage, when the system or application is getting designed. Now, when I am talking about a threat modeling, okay, now there are different kind of threat models which are available. One is we have a pasta. One is we have a dread model. And one is we have a stride model. So pasta is not like that eating pasta. Okay, so don't get excited. So pasta means process of attack simulation and threat analysis. Pasta means process of attack simulation and threat analysis. Okay, so don't worry, from the exam point of view, pasta is not testable in the exam. Dread model is certainly not testable in the exam. But what is testable in the exam is the stride model. What is testable in the exam is stride model. Now, what do you mean by, so stride is basically a threat model which is developed by Microsoft. Stride is basically a threat model which is developed by Microsoft. Okay, now what do you mean by stride? Stride stands for spoofing. Stride stands for spoofing, tampering, okay, repudiation, then we have a information disclosure. Then we have a information disclosure. Then we basically have a denial of service. And then we basically have a elevation of privilege. We basically have a elevation of privilege. Just a second, team. I'm getting a call. So now when we are talking about spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege, don't worry, we are going to discuss this in detail. I'm just giving you one, a simple example. What do you mean by security is much less expensive and easier to justify when built into the design versus added as an afterthought. So now, currently, I am doing a threat modeling on this individual web server, which is running. I'm currently doing a threat modeling on this single piece of web server where I am running the website http://www.contessor.com. Now, because this website is running on HTTP, it is not running on HTTPS. One thing which you team which you will agree, because this is running on HTTP, spoofing is very much easily possible, right, team? Because it is not having any digital certificate assigned to it, it is very much possible. Spoofing is possible. So let's say we have a person. We basically have a person called as Money. Okay, now Money is basically accessing this website. Okay, and we have another person called as Aditya. Okay, so now what Aditya did, Aditya basically captured this session and then modified it and replaying it into the web server. Okay, so Aditya is basically faking, credentials of Money. So spoofing is very much possible. Okay, the data which is being sent from the client to the web server, it is basically being run on it is basically exchanged on an open channel. So modification, tampering is very much possible, right? Tampering is very much possible. Repudiation is possible. Repudiation means someone is denying that they haven't done the activity. So let's say if Money stole some PII records from this web server. So Money used this web server to commit a SQL injection attack to stole some PII records. Okay. But later on, Money is denying that I haven't done this activity. That is called as a repudiation. Now the problem is, because this website is running on HTTP, we have no means to exactly prove that, it is money who did the transaction. Okay, information disclosure is possible because because this entire information is exchanged in an open channel. It is a basically threat to the confidentiality. Because we are running a web server on a single system, denial of service is very much possible, and elevation of privilege, where someone is accessing the website using normal user and elevating themselves as an administrator or root and doing the damage. All this kind of attacks is very much possible. So now what I am basically doing in the threat modeling is, I am trying to identify that what kind of attacks are possible if I run this particular web application on a single web server under HTTP protocol. Okay, so that is something which is called as a threat modeling. So what I do is, with the help of threat modeling, I am trying to identify what are the threats, risks, and vulnerabilities my system can impact. What are the threat, risks, and vulnerabilities which can impact my web application? And then I am designing the security controls while my website is in the development stage to prevent this kind of attacks from happening. So now one live example of a DOS attack I can give you. So rather than deploying the web application on a single web server, we basically have an entire web server farm. Okay, so that is one high availability, is a one perfect control which can prevent the DOS attack from happening. Okay, repudiation. Repudiation means where the best control for repudiation is non-repudiation. One live example of a non-repudiation I can give you is, whenever you transfer any money from one account to another account using your net banking, you basically get something called as a OTP. Or when you modify anything, when you file your ITR and all using Aadhaar, you basically get an OTP. That OTP is a live example of a non-repudiation. Until and unless you enter the OTP, you will not be able to do the transaction. Tomorrow, after entering the OTP, you did the transaction and you later on go to the bank and you said that someone stole the money from my account. They basically have a proof that no sir, it is you only who transferred because you enter the OTP. So the OTP is a perfect example. Okay, non-repudiation that is a perfect example of a non-repudiation. So non-repudiation is a control which can prevent a repudiation attack from happening. Okay, so basically we have a digital signatures and all. So that is the reason why we basically say that security is less expensive and easier to justify when it is built into the design versus added as an afterthought. So now when we are talking about the budget of any organization, see, the budget is the driving factor of any organization. So now when we are talking about the budget, it basically depends on the excuse me. So the budget is the driving factor of any organization. So the budget is basically dependent on the number of staff, what is the level of security protection is required, what is the tasks which needs to be performed, what kind of regulations needs to be met, what is the qualification level of the staff we are requiring, do we have to spend any money on the training, or we basically, what kind of metrics is needed in order to track that whether the security program or control is effective. Now, one live example I can give you. Let's say team, if you are hiring a CISO, a certified certified information security officer. Do you think a certified information security officer is going to come between a annual salary of 8 to 9 lakhs? Do you think that a certified information security officer who basically has a 15 years of work experience or 20 years of work experience is going to come on a package of 8 to 9 lakhs per year? Definitely not. You minimum have to give somewhere between 25 to 30. So basically, what kind of experience the candidate is having, what kind of certification the candidate is having, okay, all these are the driving factor of a budget. So the number of staff which you require, what kind of security protection your organization is targeting, okay, what are the tasks which you need to, which your CISO needs to be, they are going to perform, what kind of regulations are you planning to, are you planning to, build what kind of regulations your organization is going to follow. Are you going to, follow a GDPR, PCI DSS, CCPA? What kind of qualification level is needed? Do we basically need to spend any money on the training to train the candidates? And what kind of KPI and KRI parameters we can use to track? All these plays a very important role on the budget. Is this point clear for everyone? Is this point clear for everyone?
Yes.
Yes. So now the next important element is we have a merger and we have an acquisition. So now what do you mean by a merger and an acquisition? Sometimes you may have seen that you must have heard about news of merger and acquisition. So now merger and acquisition is what? Before we discuss merger and acquisition, first we will have a high level understanding what is merger. Okay, so in this case, we have a two companies team. We have a company one and we have a company two. Okay, consider company one is my Vodafone and company two is my Idea. Okay, company one is my Vodafone, company two is my Idea. Now what they basically did, they basically created a third entity called as Vodafone Idea. Now there is no Idea anymore. Now it is basically a Vodafone Idea. Okay, now it is basically a Vodafone Idea. So that is when two companies, they are merging, when company one is merging their operations with company two, or both of them are merging and creating a separate individual entity. That is something which is called as a merger. Live example of a merger is the Vodafone Idea. Okay, so earlier before this Jio and all came, we basically had Idea, we basically had Vodafone, we basically had Airtel and all. But in order to compete with Jio, basically Vodafone and Idea merged. So now all the Idea towers, okay, now it is being used by Vodafone to provide 4G and 5G services. That is a live example of a merger. Okay, that is a live example of a merger. Okay, so now whenever your organization is going for a merger or a acquisition, now this what I gave example, this is basically a live example of a merger. Okay, this is basically a live example of a merger. But now what do you mean by acquisition? Okay, what do you mean by acquisition? Means in this case, just a second. So acquisition means we have a company one and we have a company two. Now in this case, company one is basically acquiring some business process of company two. Okay, in this case, company one is basically acquiring some business of company two. That is something which is, we call it as an acquisition. That is something which is, we call it as an acquisition. Okay, so now one live example I can give you of this acquisition is one live example which I can give you about this acquisition. Just a second. So basically you must have seen earlier every company, okay, every company, this is I'm taking an example of a home appliances. Okay, so every company, like let's take an example of Bosch. Okay, let's take an example of Bosch washing machine. Okay, let's take an example of Voltas air conditioner and all. Okay, Voltas air conditioner, or let's take an example of a fridge. Okay, normally earlier what we used to do is every company, they used to have their own individual service center, right team? Every company, they used to have their own service center. So now if basically I am using any of the home appliances, at my home, and if I am having any problem, what basically I have to do, I will basically call their customer care. Okay, I will book an appointment and someone will basically come to my residential location to check the AC, fridge or washing machine. Okay, but now what these companies did, these companies were spending a huge amount of cost on establishing service center in all parts of the India, which was a very time consuming process. So what these companies, these manufacturers, home appliances manufacturers did, they basically now if you see the current business model, if you basically see the current business model, now Bosch, Walters, LG, they have basically outsourced, or their services is being acquired. Okay, their services is being acquired by Reliance. Okay, their services is being acquired by Reliance. So now you can purchase any of these home appliances from anywhere. But when it comes to the service, you will basically, when you will call them, you will basically connect it to the Reliance customer care. Okay, Reliance digital customer care, where basically you have to book an appointment and the Reliance digital engineer will visit your premises to service this particular home appliances. This is a live example of an acquisition only, because what basically these companies, Bosch, Walters and this LG, they have done, because Reliance is already having branches all over India, they basically contracted with Reliance, or Reliance acquired the services part from all this company. So whether you are having a Bosch, Walters, LG, or even if you are having a AquaGuard, okay, the moment it comes to service, the Reliance digital people will only come and service the particular appliances. So that is a live example between merger and acquisition. So in the acquisition, company 1 is acquiring certain processes of company 2. Is this point clear for everyone? Is this point clear for everyone?
Yes.
Others? Fadil, clear?
Clear, sir.
Yeah. So this is the difference between a merger and acquisition. Now, but the million-dollar question is, why are we even discussing the merger and acquisition in the CISSP? Well, the reason why we are discussing, because as a CISO, you have a very important role to play in the merger and acquisition, because the merger and acquisitions comes with its own risk factors. What is the risk factor? In any kind of merger and acquisition, we are basically absorbing the unknown. When you are merging and acquiring with another organization, it is definitely going to have a new attack vectors, and definitely you are going to have a disgruntled employees. There will always be some employees who will not be satisfied with the merger and acquisition, because they have to come out outside of their comfort zone. Okay, so definitely there will be disgruntled employees. So when your organization is going for a merger or acquisition, or any, for that matter, any that kind of activity or organization is going, you have a very important role as a CISO to play. Now, what is your role? So before a merger and acquisition deal is signed off, you need to review the company's information security policies. You basically need, as a CISO, you need to review the information security policies. You need to review their data assets, determine any applicable regulatory. Okay. Then you need to identify what kind of personal security policies the organization is having, and is there any potential issues in them. What kind of proprietary and custom applications the organization is using. You basically need to ask the company to provide a copy of the recent penetration test that includes the network testing. Along with that, you need to also ask the company to provide you the latest audit report. Okay, you need to review the organization's use of third party and open source software to ensure that the software which they are using, it is safe and it is appropriately licensed. Now, what do you mean by appropriately licensed is, sometimes it happens now that in some companies you must have seen they are having server CAL license for 10 systems, but they are running 40 systems. So out of 40, only 10 systems are licensed, 30 systems are unlicensed. So basically we need to review all this, and we need to review all this activity, and we need to bring this to the attention of senior management and board of directors and ask them to clarify before a merger and acquisition deal is signed off. The reason why the review of the organization use of third party and open source software, this needs to be reviewed, because it should not happen that after the merger and acquisition deal is signed off, your organization is non-compliant. You find out that your organization is the organization with whom the company merged and acquired, they basically are not compliant. They are basically not compliant with the license. They are basically violated on license principle, and basically you as a merger and acquisition, you have to pay for the license violation and all. So that is the reason whenever a merger and acquisition is signed off, before the merger and acquisition is signed off, all these activities needs to be reviewed. This is your role as a CISO. So you need to review all this, and you need to bring this to the attention of senior management and stakeholders. Now, merger and acquisition is still fine, but what do you mean by divestiture? Just a second, team. Okay. So now what is divestiture, team? Divestiture is basically the act of getting rid of something such as a business or part of a business. Okay. So now let's say that there are some physical assets in my organization, or there are some part of the business which basically I am getting rid of. Okay. That is called as a divestiture. Okay. Or diversification. So now merger and acquisition is still fine. But when we are talking about a divestiture, so one live example, I can give you one live example of a divestiture. So you can say selling intellectual property rights. Okay, selling intellectual property rights. Now, what do you mean by intellectual property? We have this copyright, then we have this, trademark, patent. So selling intellectual property rights, that is also a part of divestiture only. Okay, one another live example of a divestiture I can give you. So where recently, I think 5-6 years back, eBay they diversified Skype. So earlier Skype was a product of eBay, but later on eBay diversified the Skype and they sold it to Microsoft. So this kind of example is a diversification. So where information usually accompanies the physical assets and interest that a company divests, which presents a major concern for the information security. So merger and acquisition is still fine, but if you find out that your company is selling off intellectual property, or they are selling some applications, custom made applications to a third party, okay, or if you found that there is a diversification activity happen, then as a CISO, you need to complete some activity before the divestiture is signed off. Now, what are the activities which as a CISO you must complete? First, you need to have a complete inventory of all the impacted asset which is going to be impacted with the divestiture. So what all the assets, you need to have a complete inventory of all the assets which are going to be impacted with the divestiture. Okay. So that is the first important step. The second important step which we must have is any process, any business process or assets. So once you have completed inventory, you need to decouple impacted systems from your remaining infrastructure. So any systems which are not, which you are going to sell or which you are going to dispose of. Once you create a complete inventory of all the impacted assets, whatever remaining assets which are going to be diversified, they need to be decoupled or isolated from your remaining infrastructure. That is the first activity which you should do after the complete inventory of the impacted assets. Once you have decoupled impacted systems from your remaining infrastructure, you need to review the access permissions, identify basically who has access to the impacted assets and whether they still need to maintain that access. Make sure that you involve your legal and compliance team to ensure that all the legal, regulatory compliance requirements such as data retention, deletion, sanitization, all these things are properly followed and documented before a divestiture activity is completed. So these are all the activities which as a CISO you need to do. Is this point clear for everyone? Diversification?
Yes.
Clear, man.
So now when we are talking about the next is we are talking about the roles and responsibilities of individuals. Now when we are talking about the roles and responsibilities, of individual, so here we basically have a executive management, we basically have a security officer. We basically have a security officer, then we basically have an information system security professional, then we basically have a data information and business owner, then we have a data custodian, information system auditor, security system admin. All these are the roles and responsibilities. So now we are going to discuss this in detail. Okay, now we are going to discuss this in detail. Now when I am talking about executive management team, executive management, they basically maintain the overall accountable for protection of the information assets. So any question in the exam talking about who is ultimately accountable or responsible for information security, okay, ultimate accountable, the answer is senior management or executive management. Okay, the answer is senior management or executive management. Okay, the next is we have a security officer. So the security officer is basically your, chief information security officer. Okay, chief information security officer. So the security officer is the one who basically plans and who basically directs, coordinate, plan and organize the information security activity. So basically here the security officer is the one who basically creates the policies, who basically creates the standards, basically creates the procedures, baselines. So here the certified information security, or sorry, here the chief information security officer, they are the one who basically directs, coordinates, plans the entire information security activities throughout the organization. The security officer and his team, they are responsible for designing, implementing, managing and reviewing the organization security policies, standard procedures and baseline. But one thing which you need to remember from the exam point of view, team, policies and standard and procedures can be created by CISO, but it will be ultimately approved by the executive management only. Okay, it will be ultimately approved by the executive management only. Then we basically also have an information system security professional. Okay, so now if we talk about if we talk about in an organization, more or less you can say the role of a security officer and the role of an information system security professional, they actually both are same only. Okay, because the information system security professional also engaged in the activity of policies, standard, procedures, creating policies, standard, procedures, baselines, and guidelines. They are also responsible for implementation and reviewing they are also responsible for implementation and review which are performed through these individual policies, and they are the one who basically do the interpretation of the government regulation and the industry trends. So in a way you can say the information system security professional and the security officer, more or less they are basically the same person only. In some organization we basically call them as a security officer, in some organization we call that as a information system security professional. So the ultimate goal of the information system security professional once again is this, that they are basically create the policies, they basically create the standard, they basically create the procedure baseline, they basically identify the controls which are implemented, and they are also responsible for interpreting the government regulation and industry trends, and make sure that whatever solutions we are acquiring. So live example is, let's say if I am acquiring an IDS, or if I am acquiring an IPS, or if I am acquiring a SIM, where exactly the vendor solutions has to be installed and configured. Okay, where exactly to place the vendor solutions. Okay, that is also something which will be done by the information system security professional. So you can say the information system security professional is basically working like a security architect. So since now the word security architect has come, how many of you actually know that when in ISC Square, we basically have a specific certification called as a CISSP concentrations? Anyone is aware of that fact? You must have heard about CISSP and CCSP, but have you heard about the CISSP concentrations?
No, first time hearing. No.
So now when I'm talking about the CISSP concentration, so first is basically you have a CISSP, which is basically your certified information system security professional. Then we basically have a CCSP, certified cloud security professional. Okay. Now the thin line difference between the CISSP and CCSP is, in CISSP we basically study of implementing the security in the on-prem. Okay. Whereas in the CCSP, we basically study the cloud. How? If a company is planning to migrate from on-prem to cloud, then what are the concerns? What are the new risk, threats, and vulnerabilities? So that is why it is called as a CCSP, certified cloud security professional. However, we also have something called as a CISSP concentrations. Okay, we also have something called as a CISSP concentrations. So now what do you mean by CISSP concentration? The first is we basically have a ISSAP. Now what do you mean by ISSAP, CISSP, ISSAP? It means it is certified information system security professional. Okay, CISSP, ISSAP means information system security architect professional. So those who want to go for security architect, they can go for this certification. Then those who wants to go in the executive management, they can pursue something called as a ISSMP, which is called as information system security management professional. And then we basically also have a ISSEP, which is information system security engineering professional. So in this we basically study the cryptography, okay, designing and everything in detail. Okay, so there are 3 concentrations of CISSP. Okay, So one is your ISSAP, one is your ISSMP, and one is your ISSAP. Earlier, there is a one common thing which was we used to have is that in order to appear for any of these three certifications, you must have a active CISSP. But now recently, 3 months back, they have changed this requirement. Even though if you do not have a CISSP, you can directly appear any of these. So now what is the thin line difference between this and this? If I have to explain, these are more, CISSP is more like you need to have a perfect balance between, you need to think like a manager in order to clear CISSP. Okay, in order to clear CISSP and CCSP, you have to think like a manager. But when I am talking about CISSP concentrations, if you go with a mindset, think like a manager for CISSP concentrations exam, you will not be able to clear it. Why? Because here you need to have a little bit technical knowledge about what is the controls, where to implement, where to place and all that. Because CISSP concentrations checks your placement skills, where exactly the controls you are going to place. If they will basically give you a scenario where they will check your thought process that, where exactly you can place the IDS, IPS, firewall and all that. So that is the reason why the concentrations are little more tricky comparative to your CISSP and CCSP. I have cleared both CISSP, CCSP, and I also have an active ISSAP certification, CISSP concentrations. So basically, people who want to go for a security architect and all, they basically can go for the CISSP concentrations, which basically comes under the information system security professionals. Okay, the next is we basically have a data owner, information owner, and business owner. Now, many people, now this is a very confusing topic. Okay, many people think that the data owner, information owner, and business owner, it is basically a different thing, where actually it is not different. The terminologies is different, but it is one and the same thing. In many organizations, data, information, and business owner actually are the same people only. So now let me take one live example to explain you the thin line difference between the data, information, and business owner. So let's say team, we have a company called as IEVISION. We have a training company called as IEVISION. Now you basically wanted to come to the CISSP program. So Fadil, tell me from IEVISION, which one of the, what is the name of the salesperson who helped you to complete your enrollment? Fadil? Okay, Aditya, can you please? Yeah, Fadil.
Jayant.
Okay, Jayant. Okay, so let's say currently we have a person called as Fadil. And we have a person called as Aditya, who basically wanted to enroll for the CISSP training. So basically they reached out to IEVISION, and from IEVISION there was a person called as Jayant, who basically helped them to complete their enrollment. So basically Jayant gave you the pricing of the training. He basically shared the schedule, and he basically shared the trainer's profile, whom you are going to start, who is going to conduct the CISSP training. But now my question is, did you ask the candidate, did you ask Jayant that the person who is conducting the CISSP training, is he actually CISSP certified? Did anyone ask?
Yes.
Okay. So how did you validate it that he is actually a CISSP? Jayant told and you believed?
Yes. I think we will have certification numbers after we complete the exam.
Yeah, but how can you see? Yeah, but you didn't ask to provide a copy of the CISSP certificate of the trainer, or you didn't ask them to provide you a copy of the certification number which you can validate, right? So there is a possibility that the trainer that I am not even CISSP certified and I am conducting a CISSP training. There is a possibility because that certificate can be prepared in Adobe Photoshop. It might be a fake certificate. So don't tell me you guys didn't do you guys didn't do your due diligence.
Yes, we I did not check the.
We did not check.
Yeah.
So basically, you guys didn't do your due diligence properly. You are coming for the CISSP training and you are not doing the due diligence, huh?
Yeah, I think for in this matter, I think in this case we did not check.
So my certification number is 752464. You can go to the ISC Square website and you can verify my credentials. My certification number is 752464. The moment you will enter that, you will verify that what all ISC Square certifications I am actually currently maintaining. So now coming back to the scenario. So basically Fadil and Aditya, they basically went to IEVISION for getting enrolled for CISSP training. Jayant from the sales team, he basically helped you to, he shared the email, costing, trainer's profile and all that he basically shared with Fadil and Aditya. After Fadil and Aditya, they basically made the payment. Jayant asked Fadil and Aditya to provide their full name, to provide the email, again, to provide the email, then to provide the cell number, mobile number and the company. So now what basically in this case Jayant did, Jayant basically collected all this detail from Fadil and Aditya and he basically feed that into the IEVISION database. He basically feed that into the IEVISION database. So all these details which you have shared with Jayant, like your full name, email address, cell number, company, everything Jayant collected and he basically feed it into the IEVISION database. In this example, my Jayant is the data owner. Jayant is the data owner and you people are the data subject. Okay, you people, Fadil and Aditya, you basically are the data subject and Jayant is the data owner because he's collecting all these details and feeding it into the IEVISION database. So basically here in this case, Jayant is working as a data owner and information owner for this piece of data. Now, what do you mean by business owner? Business owner means currently this system is basically owned by IEVISION, right? So in this case, IEVISION, this company is working as a business owner. This company is working as a business owner. So basically in the organization, we have a data owner. We have a information owner. Okay, we have an asset owner. Okay, asset owner, and finally we have a business owner. Don't get confused, it is all and the same thing, only the terms are different. Okay, so in this case, in my example, Jayant is acting as a data owner and information owner for this piece of data and you people are the data subject. Okay, now in this case, if I am talking about asset owner, so this IEVISION is basically an MS SQL database. This IEVISION is an MS SQL database which is basically maintained by Money. Okay, Money is the asset owner. So in any changes, any hardware or software changes needs to happen on this system, we have to take approval from Money because Money is the asset owner. So in this case, Money is the asset owner for this, and finally the business owner is the IEVISION. I believe data, information and business owner is clear for everyone once and for all.
Yes.
Yes, clear.
Now the next is team, we have a data custodian. Now what do you mean by a data custodian? Data custodian is the one who basically takes deals with the day-to-day activities of the data. So day-to-day activities means granting access to the data. Okay, granting access to the data. Granting access. Implementing controls. Implementing controls. Taking backup. Taking backup. All these are basically the roles and responsibility of a data custodian. So in this case, data information and business owner, they are also responsible for classification. They are also responsible for classification and categorization. They are also responsible for classification and categorization. Okay. So they are responsible for selecting the controls and classification. But implementing the controls, okay, granting access to the people who are requesting for the data, taking backups, working with the auditors, all these are basically responsibility of a data custodian. Okay, all these are the responsibility of the data custodian. One live example of a data custodian I can give you is that in your organization, we have a IAM team, Identity and Access Management, who basically creates your user accounts and all and grants your permissions, right, in the organization. So your IAM team, Identity and Access Management team, they are basically live example of a data custodian only. They are basically live example of a data custodian. Okay. Now the next is team, we have an information system auditor. These are the people who basically audits the activities. So they are responsible for conducting the IT audit. So people who are basically having a skill set of or having certifications like CISA, people who are having certifications like CSAT or CRISC, those who are working as a IT auditor and all, so they basically work in the information system auditor, where basically their roles and responsibilities is to audit the control. So let's say if your organization is saying that, you know, we are following GDPR compliance and all, your information system auditor is the person who is basically going to audit the system and identify the gaps to tell that whether actually you are compliant with the regulations or not. Finally, we have a security administrator role. Security administrator, once again, this is basically, this can be your firewall administrator who basically creates the rule in the firewall. Okay, this could be your IAM administrator. This could be your identity and access management team who basically grants the privileges once the access request is approved. So basically here your identity and access management, your firewall admin, okay, these people work as a security administrator to grant access based on least privilege. And finally, we have a system administrator role. In the system administrator role, these are the people who are responsible to day-to-day manage the system. Okay, day-to-day managing the system, like, you know, implementing patches, okay, working with the vulnerability assessment team to mitigate the vulnerabilities, mitigate the gaps which has been discovered by the information system auditor, okay, modifying the configuration of the system, upgrading the system. All these are the roles and responsibilities of a system administrator.